Good evening and welcome, people. I'm just going to give it a few minutes for people to settle in and get their volume working and be comfortable. So a big welcome and we'll get going shortly. So good evening. I can see that we've got quite a few people that have joined us already. I hope you can all hear me. I can't see you, but hopefully you can see my presenting slides. So welcome. Tonight's session is a webinar talking about emotional well-being and pancreatic cancer. And I hope that this is going to be quite an informal session and an interesting one, which you'll all find useful. So the speakers I will introduce properly later, but we've got myself, who's Lisa, one of the nurse specialists here at Pancreatic Cancer UK, along with my colleague Nicci, who's also one of the nurses at the charity. And I will introduce more formally Tara and Anna, who are kindly joining us to speak today. Before we get going, I've just got a few housekeeping things just to run through. So I'm afraid the boring nitty-gritty of the essentials. But just hopefully as people are still settling in and welcoming you again. We'll be running a question and answer session at the end of our presentations. We're going to start by just doing a general discussion and sort of talking through some questions. We'll have a couple of presentations and then there'll be a slightly more formal question and answer session. And you'll see on your toolbar at the bottom, there's a Q&A box. What we'd love is if people have got any questions related to emotional wellbeing and what we're talking about today, if you'd like to pop any questions in there, you don't need to wait until the end of the session to do that. And we'll come to them at the end, but put them in as they come to mind. You can use a chat function as well. You can't speak directly verbally to us, but any chats that you want to have, you can be written in the chat session, but ideally questions to be popped into the question and answer session, which we'll come to towards the end. As you can see, we're also recording today's webinar, and this will be made available on our website afterwards. So hopefully in the next day or so, this will be uploaded so you can then share it with other friends and family members if you'd like to. And it's also there for people in the field. We always ask after these type of sessions for people to do a feedback survey. And the idea of that really is that hopefully we can understand how well we've done and where there is room for improvement. So it's a very brief couple of questions that you'll be sent by email to fill out, but be really helpful for us if you wouldn't mind filling that out, please. So we always run a very quick run through of the services that the nurses provide at Pancreatic Cancer UK. So bear with me for a couple of sessions or a couple of slides, and then we'll get going. So my ugly mug really should have been taken off this and somebody better should have been put on, but I'm one of the nurses of 7 working at the charity. If you haven't used our support line as yet, please, we're welcome to hear from you. We run both a telephone support line, which you can see, but also can respond to emails via the nurse@pancreaticcancer.org.uk email. So whichever you're more comfortable with, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. And the phones are open from Monday to Friday, 9 until 4, and we open slightly later at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. You can leave a voice message if we happen to be busy, but actually it's really rare for people to need to leave a voice message, and you can ring about anything you want to. So if you want to talk about symptoms or just want a listening ear or ask, is this normal or how can I do this better? Then whatever your question, we'd be very happy to try and help and support you. Other things that we can offer through the charity is lots of information. So if you haven't had access or been shared any of our information, we've got quite a few booklets on different things. These can be either downloaded or just read online. You can see the web address at the bottom, or you can request for them to be printed and sent to you. They're free, so please do that if that's your preferred method. There are things on symptom management, so things like fatigue management, emotional support, other symptoms you might have, nutrition, diet, surgery, chemotherapy, end of life. There's a whole gamut of stuff that you can access and hopefully read more about and feel more informed. So do use that. We also run our online peer support sessions, our Zoom sessions. So again, if you haven't done those, these are generally really informal actually. And the idea is to provide peer support for you guys. We're running more cuppa sessions now, which are more casual, sort of either family members and carers or a patient session. So they're now separated out. And the idea is that it's a bit more like a coffee morning, and you can come literally if you want with your cup of tea. You can have your camera on, or if you really want to, your camera off, it doesn't matter. We prefer to see faces, but it really doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with. And the idea is just to get some support from each other, and there'll be one of the nurses that are hosting well. So if you'd like to join any of those, there's a list online on our Support for You tab on the website where you can see and find those. And there's 2 more sessions that are running, I think, next week before Christmas, one for family and friends and one for patients. So it'd be lovely if you could join us for those. We also have the discussion forum, which you can access again by the web address at the bottom. And this is a 24/7 community, really, where you can chat with other people and share experiences and see if you can gain some support that way. And then earlier this year, we launched our app. It's our first pancreatic cancer app. It's called Medley. You can download it via Apple Store, and I'm not going to go into why we called it that, but the idea is that you can, in theory, you can track your appointments. So if you've got a chemotherapy session or an oncology appointment, you can log down your symptoms that you've got, so you can see if perhaps your bloating or your nausea has improved or got worse over time. You can track any of those things. And then you can also look at the navigator section, which looks at providing you with information. So you can say, okay, I'm new to this world of pancreatic cancer. I've got my diagnosis and I know that I can't have surgery, but I'm thinking I might have some chemotherapy. And you can find that point on your pathway through this app, and it will give you questions and information about the things that might be likely relevant to you at that time. Also has a clinical trials area on it, so you can see if there's any studies, and lots of other information and support can be provided there. And you can share it with your family as well. So hopefully that will be useful for some people to use as well. And then a final ask before I go on to introducing my colleagues a bit better is a little bit of an ask from us. And I'm sorry to do this, but we're looking at reviewing how we provide support and information in our support services team. And what we'd love to do is make sure that we get this as good as we can and as well researched as we can to make sure that we provide you, patients and families, with the best care and support that we can. So we're actually trying to reach out to people and ask people if they'd fill out either a survey or possibly speak to us on the phones to see how we might improve our services and do things better. So if you're tech savvy and have the inclination, by all means scan that QR code. And I'm hoping, there's a bit of a rude ask to ask Nadia now, but whether that little survey monkey, which is the survey, could be added to a follow-up email, perhaps. I think it could be. So we might send that out in our follow-up emails with you and just see if anybody would like to do that. That would be much appreciated. So question and answers we'll come to at the end. We are now going to go on to our discussion session. Now that I've done the introductions. But before we do that, I need to do the formal introductions of introducing our other speakers. So firstly, because you're top left on my screen, Anna, I'd like to welcome and thank Anna for joining us today. Dr. Anna Taylor is a psychiatrist, so she's a practicing doctor who sees patients, as well as doing some research, which I think she's going to do some talking about her interest in emotional support for patients with pancreatic cancer specifically during her presentation later. So I welcome a big thanks to Anna, who's a doctor up in Yorkshire, so welcome. And then Tara White is services manager or manager of the South Wales, correct me if either of you if I'm wrong, South Wales Maggie Centre in South Wales. And she's also, I think we've been doing that about 10 years, but previously worked as a radiotherapist. Is that right? Yes. Hopefully.
10 years experience, but 6 years with Maggie's.
Okay, I've got that slightly wrong, so apologies.
That's okay, I'll take it.
But welcome to you both, and thank you very much. And those who haven't met my colleague Nicci before, Nicci is one of the other support line nurses here at Pancreatic Cancer UK and has run several of our previous webinars. So if you haven't watched them before, you can watch them on catch up, which is basically we were watching our recordings on our Support for You tab on the webinars. But Nicci has experienced, I think you've been with the charity over 5 years, doing the same role as I do, but has also come from a district nursing and palliative care background. And has also worked at an information cancer centre in Liverpool previously. So a different, but not hugely different, possibly role to the one that Tara's doing, I think. So we have a wealth of information between us. So I'm one of the other nurses at the charity and have historically worked in the surgical sector. So we looked after patients having surgery for pancreatic cancer. And I've done research and many other jobs as well. But less about us. And I'm going to hand over the reins now to Nicci, who is going to guide us through our discussion session before we go on to our presentation. So thanks, Nicci, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for that introduction. It's always good to have a recap, isn't it, of what services we offer if anyone's not familiar. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along, and I really hope you'll find this helpful tonight. As Lisa said, we're going to start off with a discussion. It's going to be really informal, this session, so if you need a break at any point, that's fine. Just take a breather. As Lisa said, the whole session will be recorded and on the website if you want to look back on anything. So we'll start with a discussion, and we're going to talk about the range of emotions that people who have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer may experience. And this can be from being diagnosed through treatment and onwards. As Lisa mentioned, the three of us have got a lot of experience, and Lisa, of course, have got a lot of experience between us about talking to people who have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and what kind of emotions and things that they've told us they experience. And we're really keen to hear from you. So we will be asking a couple of questions at the start of the discussion, just so we can get a feel for some of the range of emotions that people have experienced. After our discussion, I will then hand over to Tara, who, as Lisa mentioned, is from the amazing Maggie Centre in Swansea. And she will talk about what kind of support they can offer there. And I will then hand over to Anna, who will be talking about support from a kind of higher psychological level. So not everybody needs a higher level of support with their mental and psychological health, but for those that do, Anna's going to be covering that. And then we will lead on to the Q&A. So any questions or any comments you have at any point, do just pop them in the chat and we'll keep an eye on them as we go along this evening. Right, so I'll hand over to Anna because we're going to start with a poll first of all. Hi, Anna.
Yeah, so I thought rather than us talking at you, I thought we wanted it to be a lot more kind of collaborative and for you guys to be able to share your perspectives. So if we could share poll number 1, this will just ask you a very brief question about whether you have experienced emotional distress or upset as a result of you or a loved one being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So the options are occasionally, a lot of the time, but you could manage it yourself without any real difficulties, or lots of the time, but you struggle to deal with it. So I can see that there's only one person that said occasionally, and most people are falling in the middle category, sort of, so 10 of you a lot of the time, but you can manage it yourself. And for a sort of a small group of you, 40% a lot of the time, but you struggle to deal with it. And it would be great if you'd be able to kind of share any reflections in the Q&A function or the chat function, whichever one just is, to forgive me, Nicci, which one of people are supposed to be using, because then we can sort of just talk through some of the things that people have shared and experienced.
Yeah, it's okay to use both. So if it's a specific question, you can pop it in the Q&A, or if it's just an experience that you wanted to share and you feel comfortable to do that, then you're fine to pop it in the chat. We will be keeping an eye on both.
Yeah. I don't know if people can still see the answers or not. I can. And so I wonder whether we should put the second poll up as well. So this one's kind of more about the sort of types of things that you may have experienced. So hopefully you should be able to pick multiple ones. If there's something else that you've experienced, please just write it in the chat. So we've come up with a number of options that we thought about together. So overwhelmed, sad, lonely, guilty, fear or afraid, feeling isolated, feeling anxious, feeling grief or loss, or something else. And so please feel free to write anything else. It looks like there's quite a lot of mixed emotions, isn't there?
Yeah, it just goes to show, doesn't it, how far-reaching it is, how many different, what a wide range of emotions people experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I can see is I can see a lot of people feeling overwhelmed, almost everyone understandably feeling sad, few people feeling lonely, a few people feeling guilty, a lot of people feeling afraid, a few people feeling isolated, and lots of people feeling anxious and feeling grief. And I'd be interested to know, for the people that have felt kind of grief or loss, are you a loved one of someone that's had pancreatic cancer and it's loss of them when if they've passed away, or is this grief for yourself, for a life or experiences that you wanted to have had? So if you feel able to, please do share it in the chat.
There's actually a couple of comments come in on the chat, Anna. So someone's mentioned about logic, says I can manage it until I realise that all I can do is block it out. My mum's diagnosis is still very fresh and it was presented in a pleasant way. My mum is 5 hours away and I hate not being able to help. And that's something that we do hear a lot on the support line. When it's difficult when people don't live close by. Trembling, shaking when my mum was very unwell, because a lot of these emotions will present as very physical symptoms as well as emotional. My partner was formally diagnosed last week, but we had 3 uncertain weeks before this when various doctors said it was likely. Strangely, things have felt a bit better since we knew what we were facing. Again, it seems a strange emotion to mention, but we do speak to people who mention relief, because actually they may have been unwell for quite a long time with no answers as to why they were unwell. So there's a degree of that living with that uncertainty and that unknown.
Certainly uncertainty, and the research that I've done, uncertainty at all points of the kind of journey with cancer and after cancer is really, really common. Feeling uncertain about what your life is going to look like, uncertain about kind of what you'll be able to do or what you won't be able to do, uncertain about the treatment that you might or might not be able to have.
There's some more comments come through in the chat around grief. Grief for the rest of life, that I won't have anticipatory grief.
Another anticipatory grief as well. And I think that's one of the things that's really challenging, I think, for family members and carers is that, you know, you're trying to kind of deal with everything that you feel that you need to. So for your partner, for your mum, for your whoever your sort of family member or friend is that's living with cancer, but you don't always get that time and space to kind of process your emotions yourself. And that can be really challenging.
And I mean, in terms of when people are, so we're talking kind of about diagnosis here, but when people are going through treatment, perhaps chemotherapy, or for anyone who might have had surgery, or symptom management, what are the kind of emotions do you think that people might experience during that time? I know we speak to people who are quite fearful of starting chemotherapy because of what they understand it to be, or that they feel that they're going to be very ill, and the side effects won't be very pleasant. Are they your experiences, Tara? Have you heard people talk about when they're starting treatment?
The fear is obviously a natural emotion that we hear a lot about. For lots of people it can be motivating as well, because it's that I can do something about this now. And like for somebody who has mentioned that there was a bit of almost relief of finding out what was wrong, it's then like, finally I can do something. So we know we can get this treatment, or we can make a start on this, or this plan's being put in place. So it almost gives a focus point, and that can sometimes be helpful. Obviously there is fear and anxiety of the unknown, but there is that side of it as well that we often hear.
Absolutely. I think it can be one of the things that I've sort of spoken to people about, because one of my sort of primary interest is more in people who might be able to have surgery or do have surgery. And what a lot of people say, that as soon as they hear that they may be able to have surgery, that's all they can think about and that's all they can focus on. But to the degree where they can't necessarily take in the kind of, you know, potential, how they might feel after surgery, that they might feel really unwell, what the kind of side effects of the chemotherapy might be. And because they obviously, understandably, they've got their blinkers on, they just want to get through to that stage because it's a lifeline, isn't it? Whereas when they actually do get to that point and then they're experiencing it, it feels a lot harder and a lot more anxiety inducing, because they feel they don't necessarily know as much about what's going on. And I think as well, you know, especially if you've been in hospital and you've been kind of looked at for, you know, a while you're kind of having investigations, or if you have surgery, then when you go home and you're kind of on your own and dealing with it, whether or not you've had surgery or not, even if you're at home waiting for chemotherapy to start or something similar, that kind of lack of perhaps an immediate kind of someone to go to for help can be really difficult, because people will often feel, I just don't know who to speak to. I don't know whether I should speak to my GP. I don't know whether I should speak to the nurse. I don't know whether I should speak to the surgeon. And people just often feel lost with all the emotions and not knowing exactly who they should speak to about them.
I also have a lovely lady who I speak to on the support line, and I hope she won't mind me saying this, but there was a discussion we had about her continuing chemotherapy or not. And part of her thought processes were actually, I have a purpose when I go to hospital to have that treatment, and the fear of not having that purpose. She got lots of friends, lots of support, and lots of other things, but it was almost that diary was going to then become blank. And it's almost a slightly different fear, and she's continuing her treatment and doing remarkably well with it, which is great. But yeah, she knew that treatment probably wasn't going to be that successful, but she was fearful of not trying, because she was worried she'd be at a loss then.
There's a comment in the chat actually that's quite interesting around, as a 9-year survivor of pancreatic cancer following surgery and chemo, we can suffer from emotional guilt as survivors. And again, that's something that we do hear a lot. There is an element of survival guilt for people who do get the opportunity to have surgery. And I think sometimes that comes across as they feel that they can't complain about some of the physical aspects of surgery, or, you know, some of the side effects that they may experience, because they feel that they are one of the lucky ones to be able to have surgery. So yeah, it's really interesting that someone's mentioned experiencing that.
Absolutely.
And in terms of all these emotions, Anna and Tara, what kind of impact do you think these emotions have on someone's life? So how does it impact on their day-to-day, their everyday?
I think it can have a huge impact. I think whenever people's mental health isn't as good as perhaps it usually would be, it can limit them from doing things that they would normally have liked. One of the things that I was sort of surprised by when I was speaking to some people who were living kind of after they'd had cancer, they'd had surgery, and they were kind of getting on with their life in inverted commas. They didn't actually feel that they were able to get on with their life, because they were constantly wondering, well, is it going to come back? Is it going to come back? What's going to happen next? And actually, in a lot of ways, both people that have surgery and don't have surgery, their kind of day-to-day might be impacted. So for example, if they're kind of taking Creon tablets, that might impact on whether or not they feel able to go out to a restaurant they don't know, because they might not know how much of their Creon to take, or their kind of enzyme replacement to take. And if they don't take the right amount, they'll feel really unwell. Other people who've previously loved going on holidays and enjoyed that kind of side of things might feel too anxious to, or they might feel that actually with travel insurance being so much more expensive now that you've had a serious cancer, you know, I can't go on holiday anymore. And again, that will kind of negatively impact your sort of mental health in general, and feel that you're not living perhaps as much of the life as you would like to, if that makes sense. Tara, do you have anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think that's a important point about the life that people used to have, and that we've, you know, lots of people mentioned anticipatory grief, and there's also grief of what life was. You can have, you know, really positive outcomes, but still your life doesn't look how it did before, and that comes with a lot of difficult emotion. And then, like this person has said in the chat, you know, the feeling of guilt of, I should be, perhaps should I be feeling a certain way, but actually you're also going through your own emotional processing of the things that perhaps have changed or been lost.
Yeah, and I think it's that loss of control, isn't it? And independence that people often have, you know, especially if they're perhaps going to lots of medical appointments, and they're actually having to change their life to fit around the condition now, which tends to take over everything. And I think that can be really hard for people. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And people sort of might say things like, well, I don't really know who I am now that I've got this, or now that I've got this, I used to be, I used to work, or I used to be the matriarch of my family, and I used to do all these things, but I'm just not able to do them anymore. And I don't know what my future is going to look like. And everything about the kind of the cancer and the treatment and the potential prognosis, it measures your life in a way that you may not have thought about that before. You may have just been kind of going on and assuming you had all the time in the world, and suddenly that has changed. And you might not know who you are without those sorts of future plans that you maybe had, and that sort of structure that you had in your life. And that can be really difficult for people to come to terms with.
Yeah, it can. And I think as well, because with pancreatic cancer, we know that there can be quite significant physical changes to people if they've lost quite a lot of weight because of digestion problems, or perhaps if they're having chemotherapy treatment and they've got hair loss, they can look different. Some people develop jaundice, and that can be really difficult, I think, emotionally to contend with as well. And it's difficult to not have to explain to people all the time when you look different about things that perhaps you don't really want to talk about with people.
And fatigue can be so difficult to deal with as well. Some people have sort of shared with me, I just wish I could play football with my grandson. I don't know how long I'll have with him, and I wish I could do that, or I wish I could go out and do things, but I'm just really tired, and I feel like I can't. And is that wrong of me to not be able to do that? And again, that kind of echoing that guilt that what if I'm not making the most of the time that I have?
Yeah, I think guilt is a common thread, isn't it, that runs through this for lots of people, and not just for the people who are looking after someone or a loved one who's been diagnosed, but people who've been diagnosed themselves. It's something that we definitely hear a lot. So we know how much this impacts the person who's been diagnosed, but it obviously has a huge impact on friends and family as well. So what kind of emotions might they be feeling?
You go.
No, you go. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
I think there's a lot of feeling helpless, and again, loss of control, but in a different way to the person with the diagnosis. We can all think of our loved ones, and you immediately want to be able to do things to help in these situations, and often, with cancer, that option is often taken away. So loss of control and that helplessness can be really prominent and naturally really difficult to deal with. But also it's isolating. So that was mentioned, not everyone mentioned it in the poll, but it was something picked up by a few people, and it's really isolating for the person going through it, but also for that person closest to them, supporting them, because again, where the helplessness comes in, and your friends and family won't understand it from your perspective, being that closest person to them, it can be really isolating as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think there can be a lot of it can be really challenging, both being the person, with cancer and the family member, and in terms of how you get support from each other, because often people will, a patient might not want to upset their family member by talking about their fears around death or fears around kind of treatment and worries about that. But equally, the carer might not feel that they're able to share their own fears and worries with their family member. And some people have sort of said to me that they just aren't able to talk about the emotional side of things at all with their spouse, because, they're worried that it will really upset them, that they'd really struggled with kind of going through it the first time. Some people have sort of said that they feel that it might jinx things, the cancer might return, or it might progress faster if they talk about it. And so that can be really difficult, because then these emotions build up, and neither person is able to talk to the person that up until that point would have been the first person they spoke to about anything. And that can be really, really hard for people to have that sudden change in their relationship.
definitely. We see the closest families that really struggle with communication for exactly those reasons. And I think, we need to think about culturally as well. Different communities, different minorities have different ways of handling this within communities, which is why I think it's so important that there is external support that's available for everybody, because there's something about speaking to someone who doesn't have an emotional attachment and being able to speak freely about how you're feeling and what your fears are for the future. Or perhaps if you're really struggling with treatment and you're at a point where you're ready to stop, but you don't feel quite ready to tell your family because you might worry that you're letting them down, or they might encourage you to continue. It's just, it really highlights, I think, that need for that external input when it comes to support, not just for your physical symptoms and to manage you clinically and get your medications right, but actually as someone there for you to be able to talk to about these worries and concerns.
I think somebody's put in the chat about how the anticipatory grief is there for them as the carer, but actually living day to day being the carer for that person is so difficult and all time consuming as well. And it's difficult. It's so difficult.
And
Someone else.
yeah, sorry, Anna, I just was reading, I think the same thing you were about to say, a comment from Claire, and how difficult your situation sounds. And what I see and hear in that is where you're being prime carer there, and where are you having that time to look after yourself. And there's something that I'll talk a little bit more about, but and I think the helpline with Lisa and Nicola would be a good point to go as well, reading what you've said there.
Yeah, it sounds like just your sort of husband's worries about his ileostomy, nephrostomy, there's being something wrong with it, means that you're really limited now in things that you used to really love doing together, like going out and being active. And then it's not just that, but you're also obviously both dealing with fatigue and chemotherapy side effects, and that must be really hard because something that you would have done together is now not as possible anymore. So you've had to kind of really make kind of day-to-day routine and active and hobby changes since all this has happened. Because often one of the things when people come to me in clinic and ask and talk to me about their mental health, one of the things I talk to them about is, well, what do you like doing, and let's do more of that. But actually in these sorts of cases, that's not always possible, is it? Because people are too tired to, they've got too many appointments to get to, or they've got other things to be thinking about and dealing with. So it's a lot harder to implement some of those sort of more sort of common strategies to improve your mental health. So it's not a surprise that people do struggle.
Yeah, it's often looking, isn't it, at the things that you can do and not the things that you can't do. So, for example, if you're used to running around in the garden with grandchildren, it's kind of sitting maybe on the sofa and watching a movie together and just still having that quality time, but in a way that is safe for you to do so, and you don't become too fatigued or feel too unwell. But it's difficult, isn't it, to see that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we could just chat about this for the next hour and a half, couldn't we? Because there's just so much that we could talk about and so much we could cover. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's here this evening for your input, because that's what this is about. It's really about you and you sharing your story. So thank you for being so open about it. That's it's brave, and we really appreciate that you've done that. I'm going to hand over to Tara now, who's going to talk about Maggie's, but she's also going to do some an exercise with us this evening, which hopefully everyone will find helpful. We're just going to get the slides up, so just bear with us a moment. And like I say, do keep your questions or any comments that you might have coming in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on it. But for now, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hand over to Tara.
Thank you. So please continue to share your thoughts in the chat function and participate as much as you feel comfortable to share. I much prefer an informal, so I welcome any comments. So just a very brief bit about Maggie's. I don't know where everyone's coming in from, but I know this is across the UK seminar, webinar event, but we are a cancer support charity. We are physical buildings and we are located across the UK. We are a cancer support centre which offers practical and emotional support, and we're staffed by teams of professionals. So when you walk in, you will be greeted by either a volunteer who supports the professional team, or one of the team themselves, and you can then have immediate access to someone for emotional support with one of the professional team, or practical support in terms of benefits side of things. So we do have an evidence-based programme of support which we run throughout the weeks. All the centres do this, and they all will offer the same things with very slight variations. So there might be certain things on the programme that you will find helpful to engage with, or it might be that you simply want to come into a centre just to use it as a quiet space whilst you're waiting for appointments, if you've got one on your hospital grounds. Or it's to come in and have that one-to-one and speak to somebody. So I think we can go on to the next slide. I've asked that Nadia shares these for me, just because we weren't quite sharing properly. So I am asking Nadia to switch slides. But this is just to give you a bit of an overview. For those that don't know, Maggie, it's just a sort of what our environments are like. And they're really amazing spaces to go into. So if you're not a kind of person that likes to open up and talk to somebody in that kind of setting, that's okay. You can simply use it as a quiet space to relax, as I say, between appointments, or just to have a bit of a debrief with your relative, maybe after a clinic appointment. And if you don't have a Maggie's nearby, then we do offer nearly all of our programme available virtually as well. So Taunton, it's been on the cards for a while. Oh, Taunton's Cornwall. Sorry, I was getting mixed up with someone else. So not yet. The Southwest isn't, we're not covering the Southwest very well at the moment, but we do, as I say, offer a lot of our services, almost all of them, online. So if there's anything that you see that we offer, you can, my details are at the end, so you can email me and I will help you get in Somerset. There was meant to be one, it's on the cards, but it's still in the planning progress. But yes, you can contact me, you'll get my details at the end, and I can signpost you if there's anything in particular you want to engage with. I can put you in touch with the right centre to engage with that. So anyway, that's the bit about Maggie's over with. So what we're going to start with is a simple it's a Qigong exercise for stress relief. Now, this video is just 2 minutes long. I'd encourage everyone to participate. It does involve moving a part of your body, which he will show you. So if the movement will be uncomfortable for you, you'll be able to see what he's doing. And obviously don't do it, but just listen to what he's saying and try and follow his cues with regards to the breathing. Anna, Nicola, everyone, I suggest you do it too. You might feel a bit silly if you're with someone. If that's just a benefit, you can have a good laugh, but just give it a go and see how you feel. And I'm going to do it as well. So I'm going to switch my camera off because this is being recorded. So yeah, if you press play, Nadia, and pop the volume on, that would be great.
I want to welcome you to the beautiful mountains here in Yosemite, California. I want to show you a natural stress relief technique. It's going to clear the energy in the body and transform stress into vitality. If you can't make it to the Sierras with this beautiful view, these gorgeous trees, and the Yosemite in the background, this technique is for you. All right, we're going to stand with the feet about shoulder width, and then you're going to just shake. Shake the wrists and the arms and the hands. Shaking is a wonderful technique to clear stress and transform it back into vital life force energy. Shake the wrists, the arms, and the hands. Take a nice deep breath, exhale, and let it all go. Now bounce into your heels. And this area right here, the cranial base, is where we carry a lot of stress and tension. If that area releases, tension releases out of the whole spine, through the nervous system, and then out of the whole body. So relax right here, right across the base. Good. Take a nice deep breath. Now 30 seconds to a minute of shaking transforms stress back into vital energy. Do it one more time. Slow it down, relax. Notice how your body feels. See if you can feel that energy, that relaxation circulating through you. Take this beautiful view and that wonderful energy back with you into the rest of your day. Thanks for joining me.
Okay, I hope those of you that could feel comfortable to do that did that. And did anyone notice any feelings? It's okay if you didn't, or anything at all. Anna, Nadia, anyone?
I really enjoyed that, Tara. I feel like it's been a bit of a long day, and just to kind of get up and stretch and shake it off. Yeah, it was good, and I don't think we make enough time to kind of do that, do we? So
yeah, I felt similar. It's nice to because I mean, I know that if I'm kind of working really hard and I just need a break, I will often just go for a little walk around the office and speak to someone or something like that. So it's just about having that 2 minutes to just think about something else and do something else. And someone's put in the chat, I could feel it's wobbling more than they should, as well as a better feeling of my blood pumping. It got rid of a lot of tension. Someone else. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be completely honest. The
it?
first time I did this, one of my colleagues showed us this video, and we did it in our staff support session. So I felt nothing, because I just got the giggles and felt self-conscious and silly, really. But actually, I do it now. You know, if I need to, if it's a bit of a hectic day in work, I'll go to the bathroom and just have like a quick shake about, or Anna, you know, walk around the building. But it's just to show you really that you don't need to make grand gestures to give yourself a little bit of time out and like release a bit of tension, like somebody said in the chat. You know, when I do this, I get like a tingling feeling in my fingers, and yeah, it does, you know, help make sure you put your shoulders down and you just let the back of your head relax a little bit. So it's a really simple demonstration of something that you can do, obviously if it feels comfortable to, really anywhere that you feel comfortable to do it. And also it shows you of the sort of resources you can access from home. You don't have to leave the home. Great to release tension. That's good. I'm just reading. Maybe a bit of controlled shaking. Yeah, absolutely. If it feels safe to do, then give it a go. Okay, well, I really appreciate your feedback on that and for giving it a go. So what I want to ask now, and again, welcome comments, is what have you done for yourself today? So just thinking, you know, purely about you, what have you done that's been something that's taken care of yourself today? Anna or Nadia or Lisa, anyone want to share?
I find being outside in the fresh air in the countryside really helps me. So after the kids have gone off to school in the morning, I take the dog for a walk, and that's kind of my time to think about the day ahead and to think about anything that's on my mind before I start work. But yeah, just being outdoors in the fields with the dog, yeah, that's a real stress relief for me.
Fantastic. Great. And someone else has also said taking the dog out in the rain and making yourself a nice herbal tea with 10 minutes before getting onto this chat. That's a brilliant one, Suzanne. Thank you for sharing that. So what I wanted to kind of encourage you to think about here, or invite you to think about, amazing, Claire, really like that as well, is to think about when have you given yourself a break in the day? And again, I'm going to keep going on the same points. We often think of well-being as like, you know, going to a forest and, you know, doing a retreat for a whole week, or doing yoga for hours and hours a day. You know, you get lots of these images that come up with on social media and whatnot with the term well-being, which can often put then a lot of pressure of, well, you know, if you're feeling a bit down, or, you know, you're finding things really difficult naturally in the situations that you're in, you think, well, it's almost putting pressure on yourself to do these grand gestures, when actually looking after ourselves is small things that you can do throughout the day. And what I want us to think about is self-compassion. And, you know, often what I talk about with visitors into Maggie's is, you know, how would you support your best friend that's going through this? Or how would you support your mum or your partner? And what would you be saying to them? Because often the biggest critic and the most amount of judgment that we're getting is from ourselves. This expectation that we should be doing this, or we should be feeling like this, or we should be doing whatever. When actually, would you say that to your best friend or your parent or your partner? Probably not. So just keeping that theme really of being self-compassionate and keeping that in mind. And so here's just, you know, little ways on that theme of small gestures that you can do to look after yourself, and you don't need to leave the home if you don't want to. You know, so if you are having a really rotten day and you're feeling really bogged down with side effects, or fatigue is just absolutely extreme, is thinking, well, you know, small things matter. So in some cases, if you're having a really bad day with side effects, and actually the thought of walking down the stairs is an absolute no-go, but you've managed to get yourself to the bathroom to brush your hair or brush your teeth or have a shower, that's something to acknowledge, that I've looked after myself today. And actually that took a huge amount of effort to do when you're feeling that unwell. You know, some people might look at personal hygiene and think, well, that's an obvious, that's something we all do every day. But actually, when you're really not very well, that takes a huge amount, and it's worth it. You know, it's important to acknowledge that, and that's you taking the time to look after yourself. I really like that some people have already said the things that are on here. So being outside, you know, taking the dog for a walk, that's fantastic. But if you haven't got the energy for doing that, being out in nature, being outside, there are so many benefits, researched and evidenced on being outside and being in nature. So if you have a garden or you have a balcony and you have access to being outside but close to the home, then making a cup of tea and just going outside to sit and drink that, and being in nature and just taking yourself out of the house or into a different environment can be really beneficial. Breathing exercises, we can do them absolutely anywhere. And again, it doesn't need to be this image if you sat on the floor with your legs crossed meditating for an hour. You can do simple breathing exercises absolutely anywhere. So one which I do regularly, I don't know what the name of it is, so I just call look for a rectangle. So we can all do this now, is if you look for a rectangle in the room, so your door frame or your laptop, and follow the shape of the rectangle with your eyes. And as you follow the short side, breathe in. And as you follow the long side, breathe out. And that's just a simple way to create a pause in your day. And, you know, when if you're getting sort of ruminating thoughts, or perhaps you're about to go into an appointment and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? And you can feel yourself getting that tension and that increased heart rate, is trying to force this pause in by just doing a simple breathing exercise like this. The anxiety might still be there, but you're doing something to try and help yourself in that moment by creating that pause. And no one needs to know. So it doesn't need to be big, grand gestures. Like I say, it can be small things that you can implement yourself, or you can, you know, maybe if you're with someone tonight, you can say, you know, encourage each other to implement these things. For those of you, so we'll go on to our next slide. For those of you who maybe do have the energy to do a bit more, or, you know, your situation is that you want to get out of the house and you're able to do that, then stress management, all of these things are really great for stress management, but also mood managing, you know, low mood, managing anxiety, all of these things we do at Maggie's. So again, do pop into your local one if there's one nearby. If not, just touch in with me at the end about accessing these online. Mindfulness, you know, it can be sitting and meditating and slowing down. But for those of you who maybe find that difficult, which lots of us do, especially if you've got really active minds and you're used to a very busy life, mindfulness can be practiced through exercise, through creative therapies, art, writing therapies. So there are other ways that you can be mindful and get the benefits of mindfulness without having to, again, sit and meditate for an hour in a quiet room. Just any questions? Just let me check. Yes, absolutely. There should be other centres. There's lots of private, not private, independent cancer charities across the UK. So do check. Okay, well, thank you for saying that, Jill. Thank you for joining so far. So peer support. Go, sorry.
Sorry, Tara. I was just going to say, I think it's really interesting what you said about mindfulness. And I think it's something that we're really good at when we're children, but we lose the ability as we grow up, because I watch my girls now when they're absorbed in a task like colouring or something arty that just is a distraction to them. And I often think, gosh, I wish I could absorb myself in something like that. So it's like you say, isn't it? Mindfulness isn't always what you think it is. It can be just knitting, like someone mentioned before, or reading a book. You know, that's mindfulness. It's about being in the here and now.
Absolutely. And I think Anna mentioned it earlier, is finding something that you enjoy, and that might look different now, but it's just changing. Oh, you mentioned it. Sorry, Nicola. You said it. It's just changing how that looks. So if it was playing football in the garden with your grandchildren or your children, is maybe, you know, like you say, maybe sitting in the garden whilst they play and chucking the ball when it comes off, you know, towards you or whatever, and, you know, engaging in a way that is manageable for you. Or, you know, if I use an example from someone who's been using our centre recently, this person had been coming to us actually for bereavement support and had lots of support, and it's ongoing. And we did a workshop that was based around gardening therapy, but it was indoors. They made autumn wreaths. And it's something that this person had never, ever done anything like this. You know, I'm not creative. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. And was totally absorbed in it. And it was something she'd never have tried before, but has become now a new hobby, a new retreat for her. And she's, you know, buying all these different things now and making lots of things out of plant material, which never would have happened. But it's something that she just happened to find, and it works for her. So sometimes it's, you know, thinking about what's available to you at home or what's close to you, and going with that, because I know concentration can be difficult when on treatment. So the things that perhaps previously you've enjoyed maybe feel a bit difficult now. So like Nicola said before, it's just adjusting that hobby that brought you joy. So on to peer support groups. So again, this was being mentioned earlier, the benefit of talking to people that aren't your nearest and dearest, that aren't in your network, and not having to feel that sense of worry, perhaps, of I don't want them to worry about me. So, you know, you go into this bit of a cycle of how much you share with your closest people. So there's that benefit from being in a peer support group, but also it's that connection with people who are going through something similar to you that you can't get from your nearest person, and you can't get from your healthcare professionals, because we're there not going through it. But within a peer support group, you get that real, genuine understanding from others, and it can be so helpful. it doesn't change what's happening, but knowing that you're not on your own with certain feelings and the way maybe you're responding to treatment, and you're thinking, is this normal? Is it normal to feel like this? Am I, lots of questions can come up that people closest to you can't answer, but then being with people that have gone through something similar, there's so much benefit from it. So I would always advocate a support group if you can find one. We do most of what we do at Maggie's is actually group based because of the benefits of being in a group. So again, have a look. I know that, again, Pancreatic Cancer UK do lots of groups online. And if you haven't engaged them, I really would encourage you to do it for at least give it a try. I always say, if it's not for you, then you can leave, but they are so helpful. So if we can move on, I just had a quote. So just to reiterate my point, this is a quote from one of our centre visitors at Maggie's on the benefits of how he's found being around other people. And then I'm aware of time. I've gone over my time. So here we go. Where to find support. So just some other avenues to explore if you haven't got a Maggie's nearby, or it's not for you. There are lots of charity organisations across the UK, independent and UK wide based, who can offer so many different support options. So do look at what's available to you locally. There's loads of stuff available online. For getting back into exercise, lots of GPs can refer you through the National Exercise Referrer Scheme, which will be undertaken in your local leisure centre if you wanted to get back into exercise. But also most leisure centres will do exercises like the one we did at the beginning, Qigong or Tai Chi. Community centres, social media pages, looking on your community pages to see if there are any ways of networking and connecting with others. But also, like I said, there's so many fantastic resources on YouTube. So Yoga with Adrian, really good source of yoga videos, some as little as 5 minutes, which again just seems a lot more manageable. You don't need to do an hour of yoga to get a benefit. 5 minutes will make you feel better. And then apps. So if you haven't heard of Smile in Mind, this is a new one for me. It's fantastic mindfulness app, really accessible and really short clips that you can do if you want to, or you can build it up to longer ones. But it makes sort of getting into mindfulness seem a lot more manageable. So I definitely have a look at that, and it's free, and community groups. So I'll just run through this really quickly. Sleep, obviously, if we're not sleeping well, none of us feel good on a bad night's sleep. And I'm not sort of mistaking bad sleep with fatigue. They're very different. But when our mental well-being is not in a great place, sleep is usually one of the first things to be affected, along with the things that we all know about: caffeine, sugary drinks, being on devices late at night, and eating late at night. So it's just to have a think about what's your sleep routine like. If you are having difficulty sleeping, then just to think about ways in which you can perhaps try and improve that. So I think if you press on the thing, it will give you some tips. So again, I'm sure most of you know this, but setting a regular routine will for a bedtime routine, rather than it being a kind of brush your teeth and get into bed in that sort of 15-minute window. But if you kind of start preparing your body that I'm going to go to bed soon, and do like an hour's preparation, whether it's like having a bath, having a warm drink, maybe reading or turning off your devices, doing some breathing exercises or doing some meditation or gentle stretching, and creating a bit of a routine. So it's like, for example, the reason I'm saying this is often more for people who struggle to get to sleep. It's like you're starting to inform your body, right, this is wind down time, and start to prepare yourself for going to bed. Obviously, if you are experiencing physical symptoms from your treatment, pain is often one that's very difficult. make sure you're communicating this with your healthcare team and you're getting the support that you need with that. If that's really affecting your sleep, then it's really important that they know that. So do keep in the loop with them. So that was just a quick one. Sorry, I'm really conscious of time. So I was going to do a relaxation exercise, but this one takes a little bit of time, so I won't do this, but you can look this up. I'm sure there'll be plenty of progressive muscle relaxation scripts on Spotify, YouTube, loads of evidence behind the benefits of doing one of these exercises to help with anxiety and low mood and managing stress. So do have a look for those.
But we can come back and do that, Tara, at the end if there's time.
Yeah,
okay.
I was about to say exactly the same.
So we can, if we can do a grounding exercise as well, which is much quicker, which again we can come back to at the end. So the 2 points that I want, I'd encourage you to go away thinking about tonight is, what one change can you make to improve your mental well-being? And this is just in general, and remembering it doesn't need to be a big gesture, but just one thing that you can add every day or every couple of days, once a week, ideally more. But what one change can you make to make sure that you're prioritizing yourself every day and doing something for yourself? And what will you do this evening to look after yourself? Feel free to share it. You might give some inspiration to others if you want to share. But they'd be my takeaway points. 10 minutes is fantastic, Kerry. That's ideal. Thank you. So please take my details and just get in touch if you want to check in about any of our stuff online or where your nearest centre is, anything like that.
Thank you, Tara. That was fantastic. That was really great. Thank you so much. And I'm really familiar with some of the Maggie centres, and they're beautiful places to visit. Then they're usually in hospital grounds, but they're not clinical at all. They feel like a really warm, safe place. So if you are in a hospital where you have a Maggie centre on site and you're waiting around, definitely pop in. They're really valuable spaces. So thank you. Really appreciate you talking to us about that tonight.
Thank you. You said all the things I forgot as well. So thanks.
Between us, we covered it. I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Anna Taylor, who is going to talk about people who might need what we would describe as a higher level of intervention, perhaps, of support. So I'm going to pass you over to Anna. Thanks, Anna.
That's great. Thanks. You can see my slides, can't you? Excellent.
Sorry, we can't. Yeah.
No, I could see your mouth move, so it's all good. Actually, I'm going to put in another vote for Yoga with Adrian. She's great, and she also has a lovely dog that sometimes does yoga with her, which is great. And I also often recommend Headspace to people. And as well as mindfulness exercises, they also do sleep stories, which I really enjoy to help me relax while I'm going off to sleep. I just go and visit a library in my head. It's really relaxing. But I'm going to talk about more of the sort of higher level interventions, as Nicci said, that some people might need, although not everyone does need them. I'll also briefly discuss some of the research that will hopefully be being done in the future, and I'd be grateful for any perspectives from you all about anything else that you think is needed and we should be doing. So this pyramid here is a pyramid of the sort of common levels of intervention for psychological difficulties. And the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or NICE, developed it. And they're the group that develops all of the healthcare guidelines in the UK based on the existing research evidence, policy evidence, and so on. It's a pyramid because the majority of people will fall in the bottom, people that may not need too much intensive intervention, and the people that need more intensive input are at the top of the pyramid because there's fewer of them, if that makes sense. All healthcare professionals should be able to be empathic towards patients and their loved ones. I am aware from speaking to patients and family members that unfortunately that doesn't always happen, but that should be the case. They should also be able to recognise when someone is struggling. They should know what to do to help them, even if that's just signposting them to a service like Maggie's or PC UK. And when I say healthcare professionals, this includes everyone. It's surgeons, GPs, psychiatrists like me, clinical nurse specialists, anyone. Tara's already helpfully covered so many of the interventions for mild distress that we would recommend. And actually, they're things that I talk to all my patients about, even though they're patients that are being seen in a community mental health team and need higher levels of input. So they're really important for everyone to be doing, not just people that are trying to think of my word. They're really important for everyone to be doing, not just people who are really, really struggling. People with more distress and mental health difficulty at the top of the pyramid will need more intensive support, as I said. That might be from a trained counsellor, a psychologist. It might involve needing medications such as antidepressants. I will kind of just explain a little bit about antidepressants in cancer. Of course, you're very welcome to speak to your GP about it, and medication may have its benefit for many people. However, the research evidence for the effectiveness of antidepressants for people with cancer who have got cancer-related depression or anxiety is not actually very good evidence. So it suggests that they might be beneficial, but there's only a few studies that have specifically looked into antidepressants for people with cancer-related low mood, if that makes sense. And therefore, we don't actually know whether or not they're as effective in people with cancer compared to the general population, where we know they are, quite effective. And so it's just worth bearing that in mind, that although they may be helpful, and as I said, it's worth on individual circumstances always speaking to your GP about what they would recommend and what they think. The evidence actually to support using them is not particularly strong. But I decided I would prefer to talk more about more practical therapies. So I'm going to talk about two common therapies that are often used. And the first is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And some of you may have already heard of it. So CBT is based on the idea that your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and actions are all interconnected, and that negative thoughts can essentially trap you in a cycle of worsening mood or worsening anxiety. It's a really practical therapy. It involves working with a therapist to kind of break down those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors into a map, sort of like the one on the slide. So it ends up kind of understanding more about the cycle of emotion that you're experiencing, and then also identifying ways that you can break out of that cycle and improve your mood and lessen your anxiety. And it should give you then skills that you can use in day-to-day life. So, for example, one of the things that actually I do in CBT quite a bit with my patients is think about the things that they enjoy, as I was talking about before, and thinking about ways that they can incorporate them into their life, and planning those into their life a bit more, and looking at how that improves their mood, and how we can make that happen more frequently. It's quite a short therapy. Typically, people may have sessions for maybe 6 weeks, maybe up to 16 weeks. It very much depends on the person, but it can be really effective. One of the things about CBT that can be quite useful is that it focuses on the here and now. So you don't tend to go much into the past and sort of processing kind of old difficulties. It's very focused on practical things that you can do now. The only kind of issue, I suppose, with it is that if your low mood and anxiety is because of cancer or because of a situation that you can't do a great deal about, it won't treat that underlying cause of what you're struggling with, but it might help you understand and cope with it a little bit better. A different therapy that isn't used as often as CBT, but actually may be more helpful in some ways for people living with cancer or loved ones of people with cancer is something called acceptance and commitment therapy. I don't know why they have to all have such fancy names. It's just to make it difficult for everyone, isn't it? But essentially, instead of looking at how to change those difficult thoughts and feelings, it's about working out how to accept them and live with them. So maybe that's someone who's facing cancer treatment, facing palliative care, someone that's facing the death of a loved one. It's more about kind of finding ways to accept what's going on, understand what's going on, identify your own values and what's important to you, being present with those difficult emotions and understanding them, and pursuing things that are in line with your values and that are important to you. So it's also important, the same as with the antidepressants question, there's also a caveat in that although we know that both CBT and ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, have evidence to say that they're effective, this is typically, research-wise, this is usually done in a general population, to people that wouldn't have cancer or wouldn't be in this specific situation. So it's hard to know whether or not they would be as effective in a population like this. But again, I think it's really important to have some awareness of the options that might be out there, because then you can speak to your own sort of doctors about it, speak to a nurse specialist about it, speak to someone at Maggie's about it. And it's always worth getting some advice about the options that are out there. I also wanted to mention counselling, which is a slightly different thing altogether. I think a lot of the time people can get confused, and a lot of the sort of talking therapies can seem like they're very much the same. But counselling is quite different. It tends to be a bit less structured than CBT or ACT therapy, which I've just talked about. But that has the benefit that you can talk about anything that you would like. That's past, that's present. You can talk about grief, fear, anxiety, whatever you want, and that can be really helpful. And a lot of people talk about the process of just talking about it, getting those emotions out with someone that's independent, as we I think we mentioned before, actually, didn't we, that it's having someone that's outside of your direct links, perhaps, that shouldn't judge you, that shouldn't carry as many of your emotions with them or make them worry about you in a way that it might be if it was a family member. So that can be really, really helpful. And as we talked about, often people might struggle to talk to kind of close family members, or close family, families of people with pancreatic cancer might also struggle to talk to them about it. So having that independent person can be really helpful. So there's a few different ways you can access talking therapies. One way is something that used to be called IAPT, or Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. It's now been renamed to NHS Talking Therapies, but I couldn't find the logo, so I'm using this. But it's still often called IAPT in a lot of different places, and it means essentially the same thing. And some places will also name them different things just to make it extra confusing. So, for example, in Leeds, it's called Leeds Mental Wellbeing Service. But it's essentially a scheme that's developed to improve access to and kind of delivery of talking therapies for people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, that sort of thing. So you can either self-refer via their website, you can find the local service, or your GP can refer you, or another clinician can also refer you. It is important, again, and with everything related to mental health, there's always so many caveats that waiting lists can be quite long, which is a problem, and particularly for people who may not have that much time to get that support. And that is something that is important just to be aware of, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't still seek out the help. And there's also not services exactly like this all over the UK. So actually Tara shared with me that there's not an IAPT service in Wales, although they are doing their best to kind of bring in something similar. There will, of course, be non-NHS services that you can also access for talking therapies, but I would certainly recommend that you check that the person is accredited with a sort of reputable group. So, for example, I would recommend looking at whether the person's got an accreditation with the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy or the British Psychological Society, because it just means that they'll have the appropriate skills and the expertise to work with you. Because unfortunately, lots of people can say they're a counsellor, but that doesn't mean that they're actually appropriate to be working with people with cancer in particular. So it's just really, really important to bear that in mind. But certainly it's always important to talk to your GP about the local services that are available, but there might also be services available via your local Maggie centre, via Macmillan, via your local hospice. So certainly kind of look around and see what's out there. PC UK has just completed their optimal care pathway work, and that is aimed to kind of give standardised recommendations about what everyone should have access to throughout their kind of treatment journey, and that's no matter what their postcode is. And hopefully over time that kind of pieces of work like this will make access to psycho-oncology services, so psychological services for people with cancer and their loved ones, a lot more accessible to patients. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what's coming up next, hopefully, in the kind of research landscape. So I will actually be starting a PhD next year. I want to be looking at kind of whether it's right to label cancer-related distress or emotional difficulties as depression or anxiety, or is it something else? What do patients think it should be called? Should I treat it the same way I would treat another person without cancer with depression? So I'll be looking at whether we currently recognise depression, anxiety, distress, however you call it, in primary care. So are GPs recognising it? How are they labelling it? But then I'll also be following up a group of patients after diagnosis, kind of throughout their first sort of few months, going through treatment and so on, and kind of looking at how their emotions change and evolve over that time, talking to them about what their emotions are, what's been happening kind of in their treatment journey, where they think the emotion is coming from, and how they might want to label that. And following on from that, kind of what we should be doing about it, because it's all very well identifying all of this, but we have to figure out how we're going to support people to manage. So I'm hoping that kind of bringing together this work and involving some healthcare professionals in focus groups will help us to identify some recommendations for new treatments, which we could then test. I've also been working with some colleagues who have just put in a funding application to request for funders to basically support the delivery of a research study that's going to look at whether a sort of specific talking therapy can help people with metastatic pancreatic cancer, so people who are maybe palliative, with their quality of life. So I'm hopeful that that will be funded, and then we can hopefully get some good results from there. But I'd be really grateful to know what else you think might be necessary or important. So I can see that there's activity happening in the chat, which I will look at in a moment. But I'd really be grateful for any thoughts you had about research that should be done, where we should be focusing our ideas, particularly in this area, because there's always lots of research being done in non-psychological and emotional aspects. But I think this is an area where people are starting to become more aware. So I'd be grateful to know what you think. So that's me. And if you'd like to get in touch with me about my research, to hear more about it, that's my email address, and also my Twitter. I'm not quite got used to calling it X, if you would like to follow me or chat to me there. But I'd be very grateful to get any of your perspectives. And now we're just going to move on for the last few minutes to address some of the things in the chat. So I'll stop sharing and I'll have a look.
Thanks, Anna. That was so interesting. And I think it's really highlights, doesn't it, how it's perhaps different all across the country in terms of access to these kind of services. And I know that a lot of the specialist centres for pancreatic cancer have cancer psychology teams that work within them. But a lot of people won't be going through those specialist centres, and they'll actually be having treatment in their district generals, which perhaps doesn't have the same cancer psychology teams there. So your research sounds amazing, and I think long overdue, because we know what an impact emotional distress has on people who are affected by pancreatic cancer. So really excited to see the outcomes of that.
Certainly, when I first started working in this area and looking at and sort of meeting patients and thinking, gosh, I really feel like we don't do enough to support them, or we don't necessarily know what's going on. When I then went away and looked at the research that was there, I was really shocked by how little there was about anything to do with mental health. And so a lot of the work, even just kind of looking at, well, what's the what we call prevalence of how many people are struggling with it, it's super, it seems really basic that we just don't even know that. So it'll be interesting to be able to get that basic kind of information and then build on it with something hopefully a bit more interesting and useful in the long term.
Absolutely. And I think historically we've relied on hospice and palliative care teams to provide that emotional support, but we know actually not everybody has that level of intervention either, or doesn't need it. So knowing that there's different options out there is it's good to hear. There is some comments in the chat. So
Claire's written some really helpful information about IAPT, which is fabulous. It's
really helpful.
Often no priority based on personal circumstances, which is always frustrating. But But yeah, it's great that there are online things involved as well. And there's also things like computerized CBT, which some people might find helpful, especially if you're not feeling well enough to leave the house or get out and about. Sometimes doing things online might be the best thing for you.
Yeah. There's a comment in the chat from Kerry about we know Dad has metastatic cancer 5 weeks after diagnosis, but not having the uncertainty of the future, isn't it? So not knowing timescales or potentially, you know, what's ahead and when is really difficult to live with. Absolutely. I think that's a really difficult place to be in, Kerry, when you're just at that point after diagnosis. 5 weeks is not a long time to process what's happened, and to not know what lies ahead is frightening. It's scary. We can have a chat with you about that. So if you want to give us a call on the support line tomorrow, or drop us an email, myself or Lisa, or the other 5 nurses, we're all nice. You can chat to any of us, and we can certainly talk to you about how to manage that. Or we can certainly discuss kind of where Dad's at in his treatment as well.
I think it's quite often people talk about not knowing, and it's often whether it's not knowing about prognosis or whether it's not knowing about the symptoms or how to manage them. And actually, knowledge is key for a lot of people. Some people don't want to know, and that's fine. But actually, if you are a person, I often say this to people, if you're a person that wants to know how to deal with something better or what to expect, then you do have to keep asking the questions. And as Nick says, come back to us on the support line if we can help with that.
Yeah. Claire's commented.
Really, yeah. I was going to say what you said, Claire, is really true. And I was going to say to you, Anna, it's really interesting what your research is going to be in, because so many people come into Maggie's and say, oh, you know, I've been told to come here by my so-and-so because they say I need counselling, or I need to speak to someone, which is great. And absolutely, that person's been very supportive by suggesting that. But often the way you respond to this is completely normal. This is really shocking, upsetting you. So if you feel like you're crying all the time and you feel really angry, you feel really guilty, then allow yourself to feel all those things, because that's exactly how we respond to situations like this as humans. So absolutely, some people will need that kind of intervention that Anna spoke about, but often it's allowing yourself to go through the motions of responding to this situation and looking after yourself and being okay with being upset about it.
So no, I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist. That's, you know, so prescribing is really important, and kind of giving complex intervention is really important. It's my bread and butter. But I'm a great believer in not medicalizing things that shouldn't be medicalized. And this is, I suppose, one of my theories is, you know, it's interesting that antidepressants don't seem to work very well in people with cancer, and that suggests that there might be a different process going on, and so therefore we need to not be throwing medication at it or kind of doing anything you know, too medical, and that there might be other things to think about. So I'm glad that you reflected on that as well.
I definitely think as health professionals we do veer towards trying to fix things. Yeah, and actually some things can't be fixed, but we can talk about it and we can listen. And I think listening is really important, because just being heard is often just what people need to be able to say how they feel, without someone saying, well, it'll be fine, or we can try this, or we could do this. You know, sometimes it's just getting it out, isn't it? Claire's mentioned about a gratitude diary. Yeah, fantastic. You can feel skeptical about things like that in the beginning. I totally get that. But actually, as you say, even in the bleakest of days, there's always little sparks of joy, and it's just looking for those little moments of joy, isn't it, in really dark times, but they are there. Sometimes the relatives may need antidepressants. Absolutely, Stuart. Yeah, that certainly may be the case, and we'd encourage anyone who's really struggling to speak to their GP about that, and hopefully they will be able to support. Lisa, you mentioned about asking Tara to expand on Claire's point above about journaling.
Yeah, Claire's point, what you've written, Claire, is a really lovely example of ways that you can use journaling. And again, journaling can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't need to be sort of writing a in-depth account of your day, or writing like it's a diary. It can be a list of things that you've done that day, so that you can acknowledge, actually, I've actually done quite a lot today, even though I've been feeling rubbish, or I've been absolutely manic looking after everybody. I've managed to look after myself, or I've had this really nice thing happen. So journaling can be in whatever form feels comfortable for you, and it can be a really helpful tool, particularly, again, going back to sleep. If you have problems getting to sleep because you've got racing thoughts and things, you're feeling very anxious, journaling and taking that time to spend some time to reflect on your day, whether it be through writing or sketching, then I would really encourage giving it a go. Having a notepad by the side of your bed if you struggle to stay asleep, which is often, again, something that we hear a lot about. People can fall asleep okay, but it's staying asleep which is the problem, waking up worrying about things. Using that notepad to write out whatever it is that's on your mind. If you're thinking, oh, I haven't booked this for so and so, or I've got XYZ to do tomorrow and I don't know how I'm going to do it feeling like this, write it down and then try and go back to sleep. But the way Claire's summarised the way she journals of a gratitude diary is fantastic. And there will usually always be something that you can pick up from the day that's been something nice that you can reflect on.
Yeah.
And Thanks. There's loads of evidence to support it as well, I would say as well.
Thanks, Tara. Anna's just mentioned as well briefly around bereavement. So we do get lots of calls from people on the support line who are perhaps struggling after a loved one's passed away, and Cruise is an excellent source of support. They're an independent bereavement charity, and we are also looking at ways in which we as Pancreatic Cancer UK can support people who need support with that. But as always, do just get in touch with us at Pancreatic Cancer UK, and we can certainly signpost. We've got a couple of minutes now, so I think we've got just enough time to skip back to Tara's breathing exercise, and I think that'll be a really nice way to close the session this evening. Oh, there we go. Nadia's already done it.
This is the one. Perfect. This is the right slide, Nadia. Thank you. So yeah, we'll just do this really very, very brief. Again, this is one. It's not the progressive muscle, but this is just something you can, again, apply anywhere. If you're kind of out for a walk and you suddenly start to feel a little bit panicked that you're, for whatever reason, you can do it there. If you're waiting in a waiting room for an appointment, you can do it there. You can do it at home. It's a really nice, easy grounding exercise. So what I'd invite everyone to do to start with is just to close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths, 3 deep breaths, ideally in through the nose, out through the nose. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, then in through the nose, out through the mouth. If you can have your feet flat on the ground, that's always good as well, but don't worry if not. And then once you've done that, if you open your eyes and look around for 5 things that you can see, and just notice 5 things. And then notice 4 things that you can touch. 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell. And 1 thing that you can taste. It gets more difficult as you go down the list. Hopefully you're all able to do that. And that's just a very, very simple grounding exercise. Again, it's about sort of creating a pause and trying to pull yourself back from that racing sort of anxiety feeling, or that tension, or that stressed out feeling that you might be building in certain situations. Or if you're in bed and can't sleep, try this. More difficult with 5 things you can see, but it kind of gets you thinking about something else, which also has its benefits. So that's a very simple grounding exercise, and you can do that anytime. If you would like to join an online relaxation session, as I say, most of the centres offer it virtually. We do it every week in Swansea. You can, if Nadia, if you're all right to go to my last slide with my email on, you can email me your details, and I can add you to the invite list for the relaxation, and then you can join us on Thursday. It's just 30 minutes. And again, you can do it from home, so even better. But if you're in work, it's an excuse to make sure you take a break.
That's amazing. Thanks, Tara. It's about being in the moment, isn't it? And we're not very good at that. I think during COVID, we all kind of said we were going to be stiller and calmer and not kind of go back to dashing around, and yet most of us have. And it's just about taking that minute, isn't it? Just to be in the present.
Absolutely.
calm
Yeah, I
down.
forgot that we were all saying that, actually. You've just reminded me. But yes, it's very true.
Well, all that's left now is for me to say a huge thank you to Anna and Tara for joining us this evening and giving up their time away from their everyday day jobs to talk to us. I really hope everyone's found this helpful. I know I've certainly really got something out of this evening. So thank you so much, and thank you for coming along. We do normally follow up with an email with some feedback, so if you wouldn't mind completing that, it really helps us shape the webinars for the future and what people want. So do fill that in, and as always, you know where we are, just at the end of the phone or email, so contact us whenever you need. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Lovely to have you all here. Thank you.
Have a lovely, relaxing evening, everyone.